Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's nonprofit forum. I'm Erin Scott. I'm the Director of Capacity Building and Community Knowledge at the Columbus Foundation, and I'm so glad you could join us this afternoon. Part of our commitment to effective philanthropy includes investing in nonprofit professionals like all of you who are leading change every day in our communities. And today's session, Defining the Unknown, has been developed as the opening installment of a four-part nonprofit forum series, Navigating Uncertainty with Confidence. So in this kickoff session, we'll explore what it means to lead in volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous times, and why naming and defining uncertainty is really the first step in facing it with strength. We'll also preview what's ahead in the series as we dive deeper into strategies for preparing, activating, and learning in times of change. So we're thrilled to be joined today by Anthony McIntosh, Chief Executive Officer of Uprise. Yes, if you haven't seen him in the last 6 months, congratulations, Anthony. Previously Chief Operating Officer and President, and was appointed CEO in April this year. He brings more than 25 years of experience in business leadership and strategy to the table, and has advised organizations of all sizes and across sectors. Really passionate about helping nonprofits and grantees of ours evolve and build sustainable success. So we're really happy to have him today. And before I hand it over to Anthony, just a few housekeeping notes. First of all, maybe your Zoom looks a little different like mine does. You might have two tabs at the top of your application once Anthony starts screen sharing. So you might see one that says webinar and you might see one that says screen. So just take notice that he could be sharing his screen and you'll want to click on the tab that says the screen share. We use a feature called Q&A. So please, if you have a question, submit your question to the Q&A or use the chat box if you have any tech issues, and we'd be happy to help you. If you need live captions, you can click on the three dots in the black bar at the bottom of your screen and select from the captioning options. You will receive a copy of today's presentation materials through a follow-up email. We're also going to send you a feedback survey. Finally, this session is being recorded and will be available for viewing on our YouTube channel in the coming weeks. So thank you again for being here. And now I'm so pleased to turn things over to Anthony McIntosh.
Well, thank you, Erin. I appreciate the introduction. You just saved me a couple minutes and I don't have to talk about myself, so I greatly appreciate that. Also appreciate the opportunity to share some of the things that we're hearing and learning from Uprise, as well as just appreciate everyone and thank all of you for joining the session. So we'll go ahead and jump into this. As Erin mentioned, this is sort of like the first of a four-part series, and today, we'll do an introduction, but Erin has covered most of that, so won't dig into that. Talk a little bit about the objectives of what is it we're trying to accomplish with this series. Today we'll talk about, we'll give you a little bit overview of what does it mean when we talk about navigating uncertainty. We'll then give you sort of like the high-level highlights, or I'll call it the appetizing version of what's to come. In session 2, excuse me, which is coming on November 13th, we'll really dig into define and prepare and what those things mean. Session 3, we'll get to activate and learn. And then session 4, we really want to set that up so that we're connecting the dots so that everything that you've heard, we will review, but give you an opportunity to really connect the dots. And then today we'll just do a quick recap and thank you. So we're going to go ahead and dive into this thing because, Erin has done this. So I appreciate her talking about me so I don't have to do that, as I've already said. So if you don't know Uprise, just to give you a quick summary of who we are and what we do. We are a business advisory and consultant organization, and we pride ourselves on being what we call a strategic group of business professionals. We're dedicated to not only helping organizations, but helping communities by elevating organizations. And when we work with organizations, we are truly focused on what matters most, and that's your mission. Our mission is always focused on, elevating organizations. And when we talk about elevating organization, that means different things for different organizations. But at the end of the day, we are leveraging our people, process, and technology expertise to help organizations move to that next level of trajectory, right? The current path that you're on, our job is to help you elevate to that next path through how you evolve, through how you work as an organization. And we do that not only with our expertise, but also bringing our values to the equation as well. And our values are about the community, we're about passion, we're about teamwork and integrity. Our experience is based upon a significant amount of knowledge from multiple professionals, business-minded professionals across multiple tiers, from finance and accounting to marketing communication. And as I've talked about before, we pride ourselves on people, process, and technologies. And the last thing that I want to talk about is we are also focused on, giving back to the community. When we talk about giving back and serving the community, we're also focused on how do we donate a percentage of our profits, as well as how do we put our time into helping some of these organizations deliver on their messages and values. And we do all of these things through different types of activities, from project-based to fractional support to employee of record. At the end of the day, we're always focused on helping the organizations not just look at a single issue, but making sure that we're bringing a holistic approach to not only their solution, but how do we help you move forward? So that is the introductory. And what we wanted to do as we started thinking about uncertainty, because right now it is a hot topic and everybody's thinking about what does it mean for them? And for everyone, it means different things. So what we wanted to do as we start thinking about uncertainty, as we start thinking about how do we help organizations to begin to address this, and start thinking about it from a confidence perspective, right? Because there are some things that when you can build clarity, but at the end of the day, you have to also build confidence, not only at the leadership level, but as well as throughout the organization. And we wanted to make sure that we're not only helping the leaders lead better, but we're also helping the organization move in a direction with a high level of confidence that everybody's on the same page and we can do what we need to do in these times of uncertainty. So with this entire series over the next 4, this today, as well as through the next 3, we want to make sure that we are providing confidence in how you address uncertainty. We'll talk a little bit about the definition, but we really want to focus on building that confidence. We also want to confirm what you're doing. I mean, everybody's out there doing different things, and there are times where people just need confirmation that are we on the right path, and this will help you understand that. But in some instances, this will also provide you with opportunity to understand what do we need to be doing. So we want to make sure that, one, as we go through this, people understand what they're doing and confirming some of the things that they're doing, but also give you more ideas on what you need to do moving forward. The other thing we want to look at is how do we provide a sense of guidance and direction for better preparation. We'll talk about one of the elements as part of this series around prepare, but we want to make sure when you think about preparation, it's not just about having a strategy, right? There are multiple things that we need to address to make sure that we are better preparing the organization for how do we move through uncertainty? How do we build confidence? So we'll talk about what that actually means. The other point is, how do we provide you with tools to help you lead and manage this uncertainty, right? So again, we are trying to help organizations not understand what you're doing, but what you need to do, and how do you prepare, lead, and manage the organization through it. And then the last thing is really, what's the path, right? I mean, we all are on a path to focusing on our mission and staying true to our mission. We want to make sure that we stay on that path no matter what's coming in, right? Uncertainty is around us, and we have to make sure that as we identify the path, that we can navigate through this uncertainty to stay true to who we are and what we're trying to accomplish with our mission. So, with that being said, and all the different things that we're thinking about uncertainty, one of the things that we wanted to really get into, so what does it mean when we start thinking about navigating uncertainty with confidence? And the thing that I like to sort of, it's not about predicting the future, but it's about how do we prepare and plan for it. We don't know everything that's going to happen, but we can start preparing the organization for things to come. And when we're talking about building that confidence, the one thing that I always like to convey to everybody is you build the confidence by making it the norm. So, what do I mean by making it the norm? So, give you an example. Think about your retirement planning and think about everything that we do with retirement planning. And in many cases, many of us, we will have a planning advisor. Now, that planning advisor helps us plan for the future, but and they also help us navigate through the ups and downs. So, as you think about what's happening with different types of investments and all these different things that are going on, the market may be up 1 month, the market may be down 1 month. There is going to be a significant amount of fluctuation that is happening within your retirement portfolio. Now, and what your planner is or advisor is there to help you do is they're there to help you accept the ups and the downs. So in actuality, they have sort of taken that uncertainty that was going to happen within your portfolio and making you feel confident in terms of your plan and what you're doing. And so when ups and downs happen, that is just part of the norm. And as you start thinking about that and you start thinking about, okay, if we're doing this, when we're thinking about advisors and retirement planning, these are the type of things that we want to do and need to do when we think about our organization, right? So we need to start thinking about how do we build those norms into our organization, similar to what happens in some of your personal lives, and as I've talked about, even just around your retirement planning. So how do we do that, and why, and how are we going to get there through this forum series? The first thing that we will talk about is defining it, what it is. We talk about uncertainty. What is it? And what does it mean? And why is it such a challenge with everything that we're trying to do from an organization perspective? The next thing that we'll talk about is, okay, so we've defined it. Now let's talk about how to prepare and plan for it. We'll then get into activating. And when you activate these different plans, there are different things that you have to consider, not only in terms of what you need to do, how you do it, but what are some of the things that we need to consider when we start thinking about activating with purpose, as well as activating and being successful with those activations. And then the last thing that we'll talk about is no matter what you are doing, when you start thinking about uncertainty, we need to learn from, right? I mean, COVID hit, that was a sense of uncertainty. There's a lot of learnings that are out there. Although it was a pandemic, there are some underlying elements that happen with uncertainty that you may have learned with the organization that we can build upon. So no matter what we're doing, we're going to focus on defining, preparing, activating, and learning. And as we go through the series, these are the things that we're going to build upon to help you and the organization build a sense of confidence when you start thinking about uncertainty. So, what is uncertainty? Now, the definition for uncertainty is really about not being able to be relied on or not knowing. We talk about uncertainty being a state of being of uncertain. Now, but I also want to make sure that people understand uncertainty doesn't always have to be bad. So as we think about uncertainty and we start thinking about what it means, I want to make sure that as we go through the definition and we start talking about different levels of categories, sometimes uncertainty can create opportunities for us. And we have to make sure that we do not lose sight of something that appears to be bad, not providing opportunity. So I wanted to throw that out because as we think about uncertainty, and a lot of people that I've spoken to, it's always this bad thing. But there are some times when we think about uncertainty, we also have to remember what other opportunities is it opening up for us. As part of defining it, there are different types of categories, different types of uncertainty, all of these different things that are out there. And all of these things are always out there, right? There is always a level of uncertainty when you start thinking about the economy, right? There are economic shifts, there's recession, there's inflation, there's cost of capital around interest rates. All of these things are out there and they will provide some level of uncertainty. We're all very familiar with the government policies and how these policies and administrative changes are impacting not only what we do, but how we do it and can we do it, right? So we start thinking about funding, we start thinking about regulations, all these different things coming in from government policy changes as well as any type of regulations that are coming. The other element that we can think about is labor, right? A lot of organizations are facing labor issues. And when we start thinking about the labor market dynamics, we can be thinking about shortages one day or unemployment the next month. But we also have to think about wages and how do wage changes from a labor perspective impact what we can and what we do moving forward as an organization. The other one that we have here is sort of like changing in the nonprofit sector. And one of the biggest things that we are paying attention to is the funders, right? Not only the government side, but what are other funders doing? And because on the for-profit side, some of those foundations that have these, some of these corporate organizations that have these foundations, you have to think about what's happening to their business that may impact how they fund their foundations moving forward, right? So there are different things happening within the nonprofit ecosystem that we have to pay attention to because, yes, the nonprofit sector is being hit, but at the same time, some of those for-profit partners that have foundations, they're being hit also. And what does that mean for us? And then the other piece that I have here is just truly understanding what's happening within the community as well as your client behavior, right? I mean, the demand for some of these services are increasing and we're seeing the behavior from different types of client changing. In one instance, we see some behavioral changes within some of the clients, which creates different challenges and issues for the nonprofit in terms of how they take care of those behavioral changes, but also how they hire for the changing in behaviors in their client. And the other one that I didn't put on here, but COVID was also an example. So there are other things that come into play when you start thinking about defining it. But what I wanted to do here is just to start pointing out some of the examples of how do we think about defining it. And the other thing that I want to bring to the equation with this definition is we have these definitions, but why is uncertainty this big challenge for many organizations? And the first thing that I will talk about as we get into this is most people treat it like an event, right? They treat uncertainty as if it's this one-time thing or something new, when in essence, it's always been there, but just may not have had the magnitude of disruption that is having today. And that's also another challenge that that comes with the uncertainty is you can't treat everything the same. I mean, there are some times where things may be happening, the level of disruption that one uncertainty may have a low impact to your organization and a high impact to someone else's. But on the flip side, something else may be happening that has a higher implication to your organizations versus someone else. So we also have to think about the magnitude of disruption and what does it mean to our organization, because that will get into how do we prepare and what's the level of preparation that we have to put as we start thinking about moving forward. And then the last thing that I'll talk about when we start thinking about defining it and the challenges with it is this issue of, you know, separating results of uncertainty versus actual uncertainty. And I say that from a standpoint, we have to make sure that when we're addressing different things, that we're not just addressing the symptom, we're addressing the issues that matter. So as we start thinking about defining it and we start thinking about the challenges, understanding it and defining it is one thing. And once we're familiar with that, we have to start thinking about how do we prepare? Now, preparation has multiple elements to it, and I'll talk about it from the couple of things that I'm showing here. From a strategy standpoint, and everyone will have their different definition for the strategy, but what I will say here is, do you have a plan? Do you have a framework? Do you have a point of reference or something that provides the organization with this is the guidance and direction for us moving forward? It reiterates your vision, your mission, and your core values. Because as you start thinking about uncertainty, you need to have that North Star. You need to have an understanding so that everyone knows this is the direction that we are moving, no matter what happens with uncertainty, right? We're always going to be moving down this path because this is true to our mission and this is true to who we are. And yes, things are going to come into play and we'll have to adjust, but this is the path that we are going to be on as it relates to our mission, our vision, and our core values, as well as the people we serve. Now, we also think about, okay, now we've got this strategy or plan in place. Now we've got an idea of where we're going moving forward. We now need to think about scenario planning. And some people will call it crisis planning. Some people will call it different things. But at the end of the day, this is what I'll call your what if scenario, right? What do we do if this happens, right? And that what if scenario also should think about the magnitude of disruption, right? Because if it's a low magnitude of disruption, and there may not be too many things that we want to adjust for it, but if it's high, we need to make sure that we're thinking about different scenarios around that level of disruption. And I tell people, just keep it simple when you start thinking about scenarios, right? Think about three things. There is deficit planning in terms of, well, if this happens, we may have to shrink our operations or what we do to better serve our clients moving forward. Or is it a status quo? Status quo says, hey, we will continue to operate the way we are operating today. And if I've got a budget in place, I can maintain that. But as I said earlier, don't forget to think about that opportunistic or opportunity that may allow you to grow certain elements of your organization. So when you start thinking about these what if scenarios or scenario planning or crisis planning, think about, do I have a plan for deficit? Do I have a plan for status quo? Do I have a plan for making sure we are capturing any opportunities that may be out there? Excuse me, that will help us grow our organization moving forward. Now, we've talked about these scenario plans. We have to talk about triggers and action plans that go along with that. And when I talk about triggers, these are things that we need to pay attention to that will trigger what scenario is going to go into play. I'll give you an example. One of the triggers that you may see out there, people are having conversations around recession. Well, by definition, a recession is 2 consecutive quarters of declining GDP. Now, when you start thinking about a trigger, you should start thinking about how do we start preparing for this if we see 1 quarter of decline in GDP, right? Don't wait to see the two. Start thinking about it if you start seeing indicators that are predating or ahead of what may be coming. And that recession trigger may say we go into this type of scenario and we start moving in that direction. It could be triggered from a labor perspective, right? There are different triggers that we need to look at that will allow us to start thinking about which scenarios we should begin to start acting on when it comes to uncertainty. We talk about stability and prepare. And when you start thinking about stability within an organization, there are 2 elements that we want to make sure that we address. The first is around financial stability. Financial stability is looking at the financial health of the organization, the cash flow of the organization, diversification of revenue streams, as well as do you have a reserve? The operational stability is looking at how we work, right? Do we have processes in place so that if things start happening, we've got processes in place that allow us to keep doing what we do in an efficient manner. We've got people in the right spot. We've got the right people in the right seats doing the right things, as well as technology, right? And those 2 things are extremely important because if you have financial stability as well as operational stability, when uncertainty hits, it gives you the ability to remove a significant amount of the emotional reactions that happen when some things hit and really focus on, okay, what does it really mean, right? Because that stability creates a level of confidence in some instances, but it provides you with a great foundation for, okay, how do we start addressing these things moving forward? And then the last thing that I tell people, don't forget to prepare communications, right? So as you start thinking about the scenarios and as you start thinking about how we react, you have to think about what does it mean from a communication standpoint, and we have to plan for it. We have to plan for the cadence. We have to plan for the what, the where, the when, the how, the why. We have to plan communication because if we don't plan the communication, no matter all the other pieces that we are preparing, we will miss a key element in terms of how to make sure that we are bringing the organization along with us, no matter what's happening. So that is sort of like the overview of what session 2 will look like on November the 13th. And this is where we get into defining it and preparing for it. So on November 13th, we will dig even a little deeper into what does it mean when we start talking about defining it? What does it mean when we start talking about triggers around this? So we will really focus in on those different 2 elements.
Hey, Anthony, I have a question for you about this session.
Yes.
Who do you think on a nonprofit staff would be the best to attend this session if I'm an executive director thinking about who on my team I should send? Should it be me? Should I think about program staff? Is this a board member? Who's really going to benefit from coming to this first session?
I think one of the important things is when you start thinking about the leadership of an organization, right? A lot of the preparation, a lot of the guidance, because remember, I talk about the strategy piece, right? And making sure you have that preparation. The leader of the organization is going to drive that, right? Now, if you're an organization and you've got these things in place, and everybody's in your leadership team, they're all on the same page in terms of the direction, then just send somebody from the leadership team, right? But at the end of the day, one of the key things that people have to understand is although we talk about all of these different elements, success of all of these different things drive down to leadership, right? And this is sort of like the leader at the top sets the direction, sets the guidance, set the vision. And that leader, if he or she, if they built an organization that all their other leaders are on the same page and can convey what needs to be conveyed, then I think that's how we think about who should be attending the meeting, right? Because I want to make sure at the end of the day, this becomes not necessarily a bottoms up exercise as much as it has to be top down, because that confidence is going to come from the top and has to go down through the organization.
That's right. And we'll make it really clear in the Eventbrite description to make it clear that this is really a session for leadership. We would hate for staff or middle management to come and then they go back and they feel like they have no agency to implement these changes, right? Or they feel frustrated that they get equipped with these tools and now they can't implement any of it. Do you think governance or board members should attend, or should it just be executive directors?
I think it's so that's an interesting question, because not all boards are created equal. And in some cases you have sort of like the governing board as well as sort of like the operational board, right? And for some of the smaller organizations, it may make sense for a board person to attend the meeting just because of the role of the board, right? Because the role of the board may be helping to set the strategy, right? Versus in some cases, the role of the board is, the leader brings the strategy to the board approves that strategy, right? In other cases, the board participates in developing the strategy, right? So I think it just becomes a function of what is the role of that board. And if you're truly in the governance mode, not really sure if the board member makes sense, versus if it's more of an operational and that board is going to help set some of this as well as execute on some of this, then I think that's a different conversation.
Thank you.
No, thank you. All right. So we've talked about the define and prepare session, and now we're saying, okay, Anthony, I've defined it. I know what we're talking about. I've prepared. I've got everything to go. So what are we doing next? Well, what are we doing next is we're really activating, right? And when we talk about activating, we talk about activating with the purpose, right? We're saying you've got a plan, go full speed into that plan, and make sure you are doing what you need to do based upon your scenarios, based upon the triggers, based upon all the different things that you put in place around, if this happens, this is what we do on the program side. This is what we do on the funding side. So you're now in that activation mode, right? You're now going, we're doing what we need to do and making sure that everybody's on board. Now, key things that we want to make sure helps drive success when we start activating. We've talked about leadership, right? And leadership, when we start thinking about activating, is not just about managing the people, right? Leadership goes from the top all the way down to the bottom, but it's not just about managing people. It's about helping others lead through this time, as well as helping others inspire through these times, right? Because when we're going through these different things, people, the motivation factor takes a hit, right? And as leaders, our job is to make sure that we're not only just creating a plan, we're not only helping people activate, but we are inspiring people. We are inspiring people because they understand what we're trying to do. We're inspiring people to stay true to the mission. We are inspiring people because we are here to serve others and we are doing good for the community, right? Because during uncertain times, as I talked about, the demand for certain services are going to go up, and we need individuals within our organizations to not only be inspired of what we do, but to inspire the people that we are working with. So there is a level of leadership that we have to bring to the equation. And not only is it about an inspiration, it is also about accountability, right? We have to become extremely accountable from the top to the bottom and stay true to everything that we're doing. Now, with that leadership comes confidence, right? That leadership, when we start thinking about inspiration, we also have to lead with confidence. And that leading with confidence sends a signal to the organization, right? It sends a signal to, hey, we're on the right path. We know what we're doing. Everybody believes in what we're doing. And everything that's coming from the outside with this uncertainty, we can weather this storm, right? So you got to have that leadership in place with some level of confidence that not only goes from the top, it goes all the way through the organization. The other point that I want to bring up is you have to be consistent, right? And that's an extremely big issue when you start thinking about these things. And part of it is if you don't have a great plan, you don't have your strategy, you don't have some of these core things in place, you start chasing shiny objects. And when you start chasing shiny objects, one, you're really not focused. The second thing is you're really not navigating, and you create this level of inconsistency throughout the organization that doesn't create a level of confidence that people need to see, right? And you just really get into this mode of reaction. And what we want to do is make sure that it's not just about reacting, but we are sort of preparing and planning, and everything that we are put in place allows us, even if it is reaction, it's purposeful reaction, right? So we have to be consistent. And then the last thing that I put on here, similar to what we talked about before, throughout all of these different things that we are doing, communication is going to be key. We talked about communicating at the preparation side. We talk about communicating through activation side. People need to understand what's going on, because as you get into these different things, there will be a lot of noise, and people have to feel confident in not only the leadership, but in terms of understanding where we are, what's happening, how are we performing. These are some of the key things that we need to focus on when we start thinking about what does communication look like, right? There's communication in preparation, there's communication through activation, and I'll cheat a little bit, there's going to be communication in the next piece as well. But we've defined it, we've prepared for it, now we're activating based upon what may be happening. And these are the things when we start thinking about success, we have to make sure we look at leadership, we look at confidence, we look at consistency when we are activated and doing what we need to do. Now, the other piece that we'll bring into this session is, look, we've done all of these different things. The other piece is, okay, so what if we're on the other side of it? What do we do now? Well, this is a continuous learning activity, right? We're always about continuous learning. And we have to focus on learning, because when we start understanding what's happened and we start learning from it, this is where we start creating the norm, right? We do all these other things to help prepare and put us in a position, but when we learn, we start putting things in place in the organization that allow us to make it part of our normal planning, right? We're uncertainty. Oh, sure, we've got it into the equation because we have an understanding of how we're going to react or who's going to be doing what when these certain things happen. We have to learn from what has happened, right? This gets involved with continuous improvement. And when you think about continuous improvement, it's not just about the operational side, right? It's about the organization as well. So how do we improve not only internally, but how do we improve with collaboration, right? So as we learn, we focus on a continuous improvement element so that we are better prepared for what's next. This gets into what we call hindsight, right? And hindsight is pretty much looking back to make sure you understand what has happened, you understand what you've done, and based upon what has happened and what you've done, what did we learn from it, right? What were the mistakes that we can build upon? What was the success that we can leverage moving forward? So we're focusing on continuous improvement. We're looking to make sure that we're learning everything that we can from past behavior. And again, we communicate, right? We communicate what we've learned. We communicate where we saw mistakes. We communicate the successes that we've had, right? Always coming back to communication, right? Because if we communicate when we prepare, we communicate when we activate, and we communicate when we learn, everybody's always on the same page, and we are better preparing the organization for whatever is coming next. So session 2, we talked about define, and we've talked about preparation. Session 3, we get into activate and learning so that we can really sort of understand what we need to do and learn from the things that have happened. So, and then we get into session 4, right? And then we get into, hey, we've gone through all of these different things. What does all of this mean, right? And this is where we call this sort of like connecting the dots, right? Making sure that all of these different pieces come together and we have an understanding of how all of the elements work together and what do we do, right? So we've talked about the define piece, right? And truly understanding what we are actually solving for. We understand the triggers, we understand the scenarios, and now we're in a position to prepare, right? We prepare for what we know as well as what we don't know. And what we don't know is defined with these scenarios and triggers. But even as we're preparing, we have to make sure we know what it means to be financially stable. We know what it means to be operational stable. We prepare. Once we prepare, we activate, right? We start doing, and we do it in a manner that leadership drives it, right? We build confidence. We put consistency into the equation, and we are communicating. And based upon all of these different things, again, we come back to this learning element, right? So this is a continuous cycle. This cycle, we will always be looking at it, right? We're always going to be looking for how do we define uncertainty? We're always going to be preparing for what we know as well as what we don't know. We're always going to be acting and activating with purpose. And what does that actually mean? And how do we make sure we're doing it and we're doing it in a successful manner? And again, once we go through something, we learn, we understand mistakes, successes, and implement that. And then we go back to say, has anything changed in that external world? Because like I said, as we start thinking about the norm and we start thinking about how do we make it the norm, we make it the norm by understanding these core elements. Because coming out of that 15th, what we really want you to do is, one, how do we make these concepts applicable to our organization? And then we also want to make sure that we are creating some actionable takeaways. Now, the one thing that I haven't talked about as we go through this entire piece is beginning the next session, we will provide a workbook. And that workbook will allow you to follow what we're talking about, give you some ideas of different concepts, right? Help you create a blueprint of some of the things that you can take back to the organization, as well as when you get into this session, you not only have sort of some ideas and thoughts around what we can or cannot do, or some ideas of here's some questions I want to ask, but now we can start having that conversation about, okay, let's talk about what's applicable for my organization. Let's talk about some actionable takeaways, right? So next, at that first session, we will provide a workbook that will allow us to capture everything from the different sessions, as well as prepare us for how do we think about connecting the dots. So with that being said, you know, that is sort of like your appetizer for the upcoming sessions. Like I said, we appreciate everybody taking the time just to hear what we're planning and what we're going to be doing. And Aaron, I'll just ask, are there any questions out there?
I know this was really helpful for people in attendance who are just trying to understand like how to define and figure out where their organization fits in when they're trying to come up with some type of response to the uncertainty that they're facing, whether that's through finance and the uncertainty with government contracts, or the survey we put out this summer, which we talked about at in September at our open house, the nonprofit open house, was labor, hiring people, retaining people. It's been a really rough couple of years in the sector and of course just in our country in general. So I really appreciate you taking the time to walk people through not just the sessions, but also the general topics and frameworks that you're going to go over at each session. Jennifer, I see you're asking for all the dates and times to be repeated. We will be sending up a follow-up email with all of the dates and times. Something that is unique is that these are all going to be in person. So these are going to be at the Columbus Foundation. These are a little bit more hands-on. As Anthony said, he's actually going to have, some materials, some workbooks, some frameworks. This is a pretty deep dive. So these are going to be in person at the Columbus Foundation. If you haven't been to our physical location before, it's 1234 East Broad Street, and we have parking on site. We'll be sending Eventbrite links for you to register, just as you do for the Zooms. We will be limiting attendance to only 2 people per nonprofit. And as you heard Anthony recommend today, upper leadership, maybe your board, if that's applicable to your nonprofit organization, but likely somebody with proximity to power to make decisions that are going to be impacting, your organization's strategy and certainly the funds that it takes to implement some of these strategies that he suggested too. We really didn't receive any general questions about, which kind of surprised me, about some of the terms and concepts that Anthony shared today. But I kind of want to wait a minute to see if anybody pops in anything in the Q&A, which by the way is anonymous. The chat does list your name, but even if there's one concept that you were like, I'm not really sure if my organization has a plan for this, or maybe, we haven't taken a deep dive and my board should be thinking about this. We really try and create a space where you can ask these questions and not feel like we're going to ding you. And while I'm waiting, I'm just going to pull up the dates. Oh, good. Thanks,
You want to
Sharice. I'm
share?
glad you're looking forward to it.
I'm gonna stop sharing, Aaron, so you can share if you need.
Okay, great. Yeah, Jane, if you're not able to make it in person, and there's somebody else at your organization that can attend, let us know, or just email me if you're interested in receiving a copy of the slides. Because rather than have you register and just not show up, because that would take someone else's spot, if you already know the date is in conflict for you, just email me and I'd be happy to share the resource with you. Great. People are saying this is like the timing is right. People are, seeing this as a real value add to what they're going through. Thanks, Jane. Okay, so the first workshop, Prepare, which is a little like building stability before the storm, is Thursday, November 13th. And that's going to be at the foundation from 12 to 1:30. So that again is like the readiness snapshot, prioritization method for core services, continuity checklist, scenario planning. Workshop 2 is Tuesday, December 9th, 12 to 1:30. And that's activate, making the right move at the right time. So that's more trigger to action matrix, stakeholder communications, even talking about guardrails for cash or staffing or program adjustments. So we're in the weeds, right? This is like your tactics and really getting into it. You can see why we want to have this in person.
Mhm.
And then the third workshop in January, you're going to be coming back after the New Year break, turning turbulence into an advantage. We're in the learning part. So this is the after action review, a little bit more learning backlog, to prioritize improvements across quarters and closing the loop with your staff board and funders. Um, and it's going to be our closing the 4-part session. So it's going to be really great. The third date, Thursday, January 15th, 12 to 1:30 p.m. Yeah, and Tashia, feel free to just email me if there are materials that you are interested in receiving that you didn't see, if you won't be able to attend. Great. Well, I really appreciate the conversations always that we have in these spaces. Thank you so much to Anthony and his team. Um, Folks checking the Q&A. I definitely think this is beneficial for, someone did ask, beneficial for emerging organizations or more mature
Mhm.
organizations. That's a really good question. Anthony, what do you think about that?
I actually, it's interesting because as you think about where you are as an organization, I think even if you are mature or your status, I think it's an important because if you're like what we call the emergent state, the implications that uncertainty has for you is different than you start thinking about if you're a little bit more mature, right? So as we go through this, I do think that there is value, even if you think about, we're a mature organization. And to some extent, from a mature organization, you may prepare slightly differently, right? Because you may have some of the elements of stability already in place, right? You may have some of the elements of, hey, we've seen some type of uncertainty before. The question that I ask those groups are, okay, so if you've seen it, have you put any learnings from those into play, right? So I think there are different conversations that we can have across where are we from an organizational standpoint, right? Because early on, you're going to have different conversations than if you're mature, right? Because the mature organizations, there should be some learnings already there, right? There should be a level of stability already there, right? So it's a different type of preparation and how we activate compared to other stages of the life cycle of your business.
And anyone who attended the in-person storytelling workshop that we did with articulation in August or September, something that's different about the in-person workshops is there's so much more co-learning that goes on. And what Anthony just described, being able to have organizations in different
Mhm.
life cycles sharing that experience is important because emerging organizations see things differently and might be contributing this new set of eyes. Their perspective it might actually support, stalwart organizations that are like, gosh, we've been doing this the same way forever, and the same way that they would benefit from hearing from organizations that are more established. So again, these webinars are a really great format when we're, sharing out content that's a little bit more lecture style, or like today, doing the really nice overviews of the upcoming workshops. But these hands-on workshops that Uprise is developing are going to be high value for everyone. Um, Someone asked, what about the consistency of attendees? Is it important that the same person attends all three, or is it okay that it's different for a different person from the organization each time?
I think there's an opportunity, like I said, if whomever's in attending, so we talked about has sort of like that leadership role, and like I said, we will have a workbook that people can share so that you're building upon it. So I think it could be there will be opportunities if you can't attend all three to sort of say, okay, we're going to do this piece, this person is going to do this piece, and if we're an organization that collaborates, great. then I don't think that'll be a problem.
Great. And someone asked, do you only get to go if you can attend all three? And I'll just say, no, you can pick and choose.
Yeah.
Certainly, we'd love to have you at all three, but it's totally okay if you opt into one. The concepts, they do build on each other,
Right.
but it will be totally fine if you're only able to attend one or two of the three. We are going to limit in-person attendance only because we are literally limited in space. So we do ask that you RSVP. And if you do sign up and you end up not being able to attend, please let us know so we can add people in from the wait list. We'll provide lunch for you, and we've got ample parking on site. So please just let us know what we can do to support you as you RSVP and bring your team. Thank you again to Uprise. A huge just thank you for going through such a timely and thoughtful conversation. If you have 60 more seconds, I just want to say, please complete the survey that you receive. What you have to say always informs our sessions and the way that we look at programming. So we really appreciate, all of the feedback that you give us. We're really committed to supporting leaders like you through all of these practical, relevant, responsive trainings that we give. So this is really a part of our broader effort to support you, and we're really grateful that you chose to spend this time with us. Watch your inbox for the follow-up email, which will include the slides, and we will be posting this on our YouTube channel, so you'll have a recording of everything we've talked about today. And if you want to revisit today's insights or share them with colleagues, you'll find even more resources on the Uprise website at www.uprise.com.
And Aaron, I see a question that I'll ask real quick. I think Anissa asked the question. Yes, we do work with a lot of smaller organizations with limited staff. So yes, you can reach out to us and we can talk about a plan sooner versus later.
I just saw
So
that too.
yeah,
One of the great things about these forums is that we really try to make the content applicable to all sizes. The majority of nonprofit organizations in Central Ohio, by the way, have budgets of $250,000 or less. The seven-figure, multi-million dollar nonprofits certainly serve a large number of beneficiaries, but so many smaller nonprofit organizations do extremely important work in our community. And as Anthony said, Uprise works with all sizes. So thanks for asking that important question. Thank you for joining us and for the work all of you do every day to lead and support our community. Take care, and we hope to see you again next month. Thank you.
thank you.